everybody. Welcome to the Progressive American. As always, I'm your host, Connor Kelly. Today is a bit different. It's a little bit of a different change in the episodes. I'm returning to an audio-only version of the podcast for what I hope will be a sort of weekly update with a selection of stories and where I give my opinion and analysis on those stories. In today's episode, I will discuss the debate between Governor Walz and Senator J.D. Vance, Hurricane Helene's devastating impact on the country, Trump's recent calls for an hour of violence, and much more. With that out of the way, let's get into the show. Earlier this Tuesday, CBS hosted the vice presidential debate between vice presidential candidates J.D. Vance and Tim Walz. Now, I have already gone over the debate since I did a live stream reacting to it on Tuesday, but I thought it would be a good idea to reevaluate some of the key moments here, because while the debates don't necessarily change the electoral outcome, they do provide insight into the state of the race and the candidates themselves, which can be helpful. So right off the bat, I will say that I don't feel as though one person or another won the debate outright. It was more of a mixed bag, with Walz initially being nervous before inevitably finding his footing later in the evening. However, there were some key points that I think should have been disqualifying for Vance if we have lived in normal. However, I think there were some key points that I think would have been disqualifying for Vance if we lived in normal times. Unfortunately, we do not. In one instance, Vance refused to acknowledge that Trump lost the 2020 election. Take a look.
And I think there's a lot of agreement. This is one that we are miles apart on. This was a threat to our democracy in a way that we had not seen. And it manifested itself because of Donald Trump's inability to say. He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
Now, whether or not you agree with the Democrats, the fact of the matter remains that Vance, a vice presidential candidate who could very well be a heartbeat away from being president himself, is unable to acknowledge the basic facts about the previous election, and that should be disqualifying. And yes, there were embarrassing moments like Tim Walz failing to explain his claims about Tiananmen Square and where he was at the time, but those things have no material impact on our system of government. The same can't be said of J.D. Vance's failure to address this critical issue. Whether or not you are willing to accept the results of an election ensures the ability of our government to continue peaceably transferring power from one politician and one leader to another. And failing to support that is a problem. And that wasn't the only problem with J.D. Vance's performance in the debate. While Vance appeared more polished, he wasn't really that much of a well-rounded politico, especially on the issues. For example, at one point, he claimed he had not supported a national abortion ban. That was not the case. According to The Independent, during the debate, Vance falsely claimed that he never supported a national abortion ban, but instead supported some minimum national standard. However, in 2022, when he was running for the Senate, Vance told the Very Fine People podcast that he, quote, certainly would like abortion to be illegal nationally, unquote. He also said he was, quote, sympathetic to the idea that a national ban was necessary to stop women from traveling across different states for abortion care. That same year, he also supported Senator Lindsey Graham's proposal to impose a national ban on abortion at 15 weeks of pregnancy, unquote. So right off the bat, he lied and did so repeatedly. At one point, he claimed that Governor Walz signed a bill that would not require doctors to care for a born-alive baby that was the result of an abortion. But as The Independent notes, there were already additional laws that required care to said infants who are not likely to survive. Vance is just lying through his teeth here. Nor was it the only time that Vance showed his dark side. Though Vance composed himself for the most part throughout the debate, there was at least one moment where he tried to claim Haitian migrants in Springfield, Ohio, were here illegally. The moderators, for once, pointed out that that wasn't the case. Here's how he responded.
Thank you, Governor. And just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected status.
Well, Margaret, but
thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important because
we're going to turn out of the economy. Thank you,
Margaret. The rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP One app, where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That is the facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret, by our own leadership.
Thank you, Senator, for describing the legal process. We have so much to get to, Senator.
Those laws have been on the books since 1990.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The CBP-1 app has not been on the books since 1990. It's something that Kamala Harris created, Margaret.
Gentlemen, the audience can't hear you because your mics are cut. We have so much we want to get to. Thank you for explaining the legal process. Nora?
This is why live fact-checking is so important, and proper moderation is really necessary to deal with somebody like Vance. Failing to adequately address the factuality of statements by Vance, and yes, sometimes Tim Walz, is a disservice to the public, and quite frankly, it's lazy on CBS's part. Still, I was impressed by the civility of the debate, but I sincerely doubt it will change the election, and quite frankly, I don't think there was any clear winner here. It was mostly a tie. In other news, Hurricane Helene continues to devastate several states, including the Carolinas, Florida, Georgia, and Tennessee. The Associated Press reports that over 100 people have been killed, with North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper announcing that he expects the death toll to be much higher going forward. In response, President Biden announced that he plans to visit North Carolina this week and that he will be asking Congress for additional funding to help victims of the horrendous disaster. A previous spending bill passed by Congress didn't account for emergency aid, although President Biden approved emergency declarations for North Carolina and Florida, allowing immediate access to emergency funds that don't require congressional approval. Despite the tragedy, Trump Republicans have elected to make the issue partisan, lying about the Biden administration's response to the horrible tragedy going on. In the case of Trump himself, he has hammered Harris for, according to him, staging a fake photo of her receiving a FEMA briefing. He also falsely claimed that the governor of Georgia was unable to reach out to the president for help. The governor himself has stated he has talked with President Biden and that he has what he needs to respond to this tragedy. However, rather than leaving it there, President Biden responded, calling out Trump for his lies.
Mr. President and Governor Cooper, Donald Trump has accused both of you of ignoring the disaster.
He is lying. Let me get this straight. He's lying. And the governor told him he was lying. The governor told me he was lying. I've spoken to the governor, spent time with him, and he told me he's lying. I don't know why he does this. And the reason I get so angry about it, I don't care about what he says about me, but I care what he communicates to the people that are in need. He implies that we're not doing everything possible. We are. And you spoke to the governor, I assume you heard the Republican governor of Georgia talk about that he was on the phone with me more than once. So that's simply not true, and it's irresponsible.
None of this helps or improves the lives of the people who are currently suffering under this horrific storm. Trump could show some decency by organizing resources and support for those in need. He has the followers and resources to do so. Instead, he pursues a ridiculous accusation without evidence, and instead of encouraging unity, he sows division. That shouldn't surprise anybody, as Donald Trump has repeatedly demonstrated that he is more interested in dividing the country than he is in leading it. He is only interested in distracting people from the critical role of climate change in these increasingly disastrous storms and gaining attention for himself. While Helene still rages, it is important to remember that every American deserves to be safe from disasters, and we all deserve better than Donald Trump. That unfitness is what leads into my next story. In a speech earlier this week, the former president advocated for what he called one rough hour against supposed criminals, the implication being that the police would engage in violence against these hypothetical criminals, even though overall crime is down.
What the hell is going on? See, we have to let the police do their job. And if they have to be extraordinarily rough. And you know, the funny thing with all of that stuff, look at the department stores, same thing. They walk into you see these guys walking out with air conditioners, with refrigerators on their back, the craziest thing. And the police aren't allowed to do their job. They're told, if you do anything, you're going to lose your pension, you're going to lose your family, your house, your car. The police want to do it. The Border Patrol wants to do it. Border Patrol, they're incredible. They want to do it. They're not allowed to do it because the liberal left won't let them do it. The liberal left wants to destroy them, and they want to destroy our country. You know, if you had one day, like one real rough, nasty day with the drugstores as an example, where when they start walking out with, you know, she created something in San Francisco, $950 you're allowed to steal. Anything above that, you will be prosecuted. Well, it works out that the 950 is a misnomer because you can steal whatever you want. You can go way above. But you'd see, originally you saw kids walk in with calculators. They were calculators. They didn't want to go over the $950. They're standing with calculators, adding it up. You know, these are smart people. They're not so stupid, but they have to be taught. Now, if you had one really violent day, like a guy like Mike Kelly, put him in charge, Congressman Kelly, put him in charge for one day. Mike, would you say, he's right here, he's a great congressman. Would you say, Mike, that if you were in charge, you would say, oh, please, don't touch them, don't touch them, let them rob your store. Let all these stores go out of business, right? They don't pay rent, the city doesn't have money. It's a chain of events that's so bad. One rough hour, and I mean real rough, the word will get out, and it will end immediately. End immediately. You know, it'll end immediately.
It goes without saying, but this depiction of police violence and extrajudicial punishment as good is yet another example of authoritarian tendencies by Trump and his cronies. The rule of law can never become the law of the cruel. Extrajudicial punishment is never acceptable, and the fact that Trump publicly endorsed this kind of cruelty for the sake of property of all things is insane. If there is one thing that can be expressed from this podcast, it is that Trump is entirely unfit to be president, and even more so now with his overt calls for violence by the state. This is especially hypocritical considering Trump's own criminality, both alleged and convicted. And as we'll see in my next story, Trump truly doesn't care about the consequences of his actions. In another example of Trump's precarious legal situation, new evidence was disclosed in a court filing on Monday. Judge Chutkan ordered the partial release of filings made by special counsel Jack Smith. Smith is currently arguing that much of Trump's conduct on January 6th do not fall under the cover of official acts as set by the Supreme Court. Among some of the filing's findings were private, previously undisclosed conversations which show Trump seemingly didn't care about the consequences of the violence or the lies he was spreading, much less the safety of then Vice President Mike Pence. The New York Times reports that when an aide told Trump that Mike Pence was in danger because of the rioting at the Capitol, Trump allegedly responded saying, "So what?" In another instance, when one of Trump's lawyers alerted him that his claims of voter fraud would not hold up in court, the former president allegedly responded saying, quote, "The details don't matter." To emphasize his point, special counsel Smith wrote in his filing that, quote, "The defendant asserts that he is immune from prosecution for his criminal scheme to overturn the 2020 presidential election because he claims it is entailed for official conduct. Not so. Although the defendant was the incumbent president during the charged conspiracies, his scheme was fundamentally a private one," unquote. And that is exactly right. The fact of the matter is that Donald Trump was not acting in his official position as president when he was illegally attempting to overthrow the United States government through the overthrow of a fair and free election. Official acts should be strictly construed as a matter of upholding enumerated or implied powers, not criminal activity that is not authorized for a president to do. The fact of the matter is Donald Trump and his behavior on January 6th and leading up to it was utterly and completely reprehensible. And while it is unlikely that Donald Trump will feel the full results of this filing just yet, or even before Election Day, it still remains important to remember that not only is Donald Trump a convicted criminal for his more private affairs, but he is also an alleged criminal who tried to overturn a free and fair election. My hope with these new filings is that the American people, those who are undecided, will take a look at them and realize that Donald Trump is not only a controversial figure, but a danger to the well-being of the American people and our government, and vote accordingly. Thank you very much for listening. If you enjoyed, please share it with your friends and family. If you have anything you would like to add, feel free to comment on Spotify or YouTube. Also, feel free to check out my website at theprogressiveamerican.com. Thanks again for listening and have a wonderful day.